Hi there, the internet. I decided to do a second video on Hereditary because there's a lot to talk about, but mostly because I wanted to present my theory as to what's really going on in the movie. As I said in my review, I don't see anybody talking about this theory, even though it seems kind of obvious to me. I'll present it and see what you think. Also, I'm on my second half of the beer I started in that review. There's spoilers, obviously, in this video, so if you haven't seen the movie yet, throw this video on your watch later and watch that one instead for now. In this video, I'll be stating the franchise that I think Hereditary borrows a little too heavily from. This was one of my complaints in my review, and I couldn't really go any further into it. And presenting my theory about what's really going on in this damn movie. Go ahead and skip to this time mark if you don't care about the first one. But first, if you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe because you're the very best. And follow me on Instagram if you feel like it.
The very best.
There is a constant question running through this movie about what kind of horror movie it's going to be. Will there be supernatural elements or will it be strictly psychological? That question, it turns out, is at the very heart of the story. The director has come out and said basically that he wanted a deliberate confusion between mental health and the supernatural. He wanted us asking, is this going to be in their heads or is this going to be some kind of supernatural thing? That's all exciting and cool to me. But when we got the answer that it's a cult trying to resurrect a evil devil demon thing, trying to give him a body to manifest on Earth, it played out shockingly similar to another fairly recent horror franchise. That franchise being Paranormal Activity. There is a pretty big amount of serious plot points and imagery being borrowed from Paranormal Activity in this movie. If you are down with Hereditary spoilers, but for some reason you don't want Paranormal Activity spoilers, then skip right here. Go ahead. For you heroes that withstood my spoiler warning, a bunch of the that these two things have in common. Both have weird, crazy cults with frequently naked people trying to give a demonic thing a presence on Earth by giving it a body. Both entities haunt young teenage boys as a specific part of their end goal. Both end with a single shot of the demonic entity succeeding in getting a physical body. Both have similar, the cult is hiding in or around the house in the final scene imagery. Both even involve old photographs of a marriage to the evil entity as a plot point. Paranormal told its story in 6 movies. 3 of them felt very sloppy. And ultimately, it feels like Hereditary is telling a much more concise version of that story in a single movie, while adding enough original stuff such as the mental illness aspect of the film. And on to my theory part of the video. I ain't the sharpest tool in the shed. She was there. So the film starts with an exterior shot of the miniature homes and rooms that Annie builds. And then that shot moves closer into a shot of the miniature Peter's room, in which Peter and his dad, 2 actors, living actors, are. A scene plays out between them and the film begins. Then the entirety of the film happens, ending with the cult in the treehouse worshipping Paimon/Peter, and the camera pulls away and outside of the treehouse, looking in on it exactly like it looked in on the model room of Peter's bedroom in the first scene, clearly suggesting that it's another model. The film language of the movie is suggesting that the entirety of the film took place within those miniature models. This is a metaphor and could be just metaphor, but what if it isn't? I put it to you that the story that we see between these 2 scenes is all a story built by Annie to process her mother's death and her relationship with her mother in life, and is in fact her exhibit at the Archer Art Gallery. We're told about her exhibit at the art gallery 3 times. Once when we're introduced to it, once on a post-it note where she's suggesting to herself that she could postpone the art gallery, and once again in a voice message left by the art gallery telling her that they're comfortable with postponing it. The movie wants us to know about this art gallery. To counter, it would be very meta of Annie to write a story for an art gallery which included a deadline about her art gallery. But we know that Annie is very meta. One of the pieces that she's building for the gallery is in fact a gallery with a bunch of smaller miniature homes within it, a bunch of mini miniature homes. These mini minis are indisputably meta, and writer-director Ari Aster showed us those for a reason. I think it's a little on the nose. And if he's not telling us that there's something meta going on, he's at least telling us that there's something more going on. The inclusion of the super meta mini-minis 3 times telling us about the Archer Gallery and the opening and closing shot zooming in and out of miniatures. Consider these together, and they undeniably say something about the plot. The one thing I can think of that explains all three things is my theory, that the story in this movie is built by the character Annie for the Archer Gallery exhibit. Maybe you assumed that the vague gallery exhibit of the future was just going to be a display of the houses and rooms and scenes that she was creating. But I believe evidence shows there's a little more than that, because we see Annie create very realistic little miniatures of the people in her life and place them in those scenes. They're placed in extremely emotional scenes. There is a story absolutely being told by Annie in the scene she creates with the car and the telephone pole in miniature. There is even a profound story in the scene she made of her feeding Charlie as a baby and her mother trying to take Charlie from her, holding her own breast in her hand, trying to feed Charlie herself. These things tell me that Annie is definitely building a story, not just building displays, but a story for her exhibit at the Archer Gallery. If this is true, if this is all a story being told by Annie about herself and her family, then what else can we infer? She was naked, covered up with her finger and her thumb in the shape of a... I believe she was working on this project and writing the story at the same time as within the story she is working on the project for the Archer Gallery, which is to say, right after her mother's death. So no matter your interpretation, she did write the story that she created for the Archer Gallery following her mother's real death. And my interpretation says that she wrote a horrible story about her family being torn apart piece by piece after her mother's death by what her mother left behind. Everything is set in motion by her mother, and ultimately Annie's family is destroyed. As seen in the movie and the story, Annie struggled to process what her mother's death meant to her, given that in life, her mother was extremely controlling, and Annie wasn't actually sad about her mother's death. So, my theory goes, she wrote the story that we're presented, her story for the Archer Gallery, to work through those feelings. Feelings like a lot of hate and resentment towards her mother, a fear of the mental instability she might have inherited from her mother, what might become of her own daughter's life, which had been set on a strange course by her grandmother's early influence and possessiveness, which Annie allowed. Annie is afraid that what her mother left behind will destroy her family, and Annie is afraid that she is responsible for allowing that. She doesn't know if what might happen is her fault or her mother's fault for the legacy she left behind. In a way, it's a fear most people deal with, and it plays into one of the central themes of the movie. As the characters in Peter's class discussed, is it more or less tragic if the characters had no control over what happened to them? And that's the story Annie wrote to process her fears. Her mother, in her story The Actual Queen of Hell, though dead, left behind things that would ultimately ruin Annie's family, and Annie didn't know whether she'd have any control over it. Whether or not this is all just a story Annie wrote, those fears are there in her character, and we've seen the version of the story where all those fears come true. If it is just a story for Annie, then there might be a version of it where they don't. Maybe in writing this story for the Archer Gallery, she processes all of her hate and fears and guilt, and comes home a better mother to her kids. One would hope they never see the gallery. What do you think? Do you think I'm crazy? Crazy wrong about what's going on in Hereditary, am I right? Or do you think I have some good points? Let me know in the comments. Period. And chop the head off of that like button if you actually like the video. Consider subscribing for weekly movie reviews. And follow me on Instagram for photos of my cat. Thanks for watching. Somebody once told me the world was gonna roll me. I ain't the sharpest tool in the shed. She was like